All right, welcome back, Little Warrior Church. It's time for another day Bible reading. Hope you guys had a fantastic day at church, if you guys go. If you don't, here's a place to start reading the Bible and getting your mind acquainted with it, because sometimes I know before I started, I didn't know what was in this, and I started reading it, and wow, I didn't know that was in there, kind of stuff. So hopefully this can be your safe space in learning the Bible on your own. And hopefully, you will start to like it as much as I do, because it changed your life. If you could, go ahead and like the podcast wherever you're at, and then join the Facebook group. Let's go to Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for everything that you've given us. Help us understand what we're about to read today as we're finishing the book of Esther. So that's incredibly exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. Let me pray. Amen. As stated, we're going to finish the book of Esther today, starting in chapter 8. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, to Esther, the queen. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. The king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. So the king didn't even know that Mordecai was taking care of Esther. You can imagine after the debacle with Haman, he saw Mordecai definitely in a better light. Mordecai saved the king's life as well. Why wouldn't he make Mordecai, second in command? Why wouldn't he do it? Verse 3, Esther spoke yet again before the king and fell down at his feet and begged him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his plan that he has planned against the Jews. Then the king held out to Esther the golden scepter. So Esther arose and stood before the king. She said, If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, I am pleasing in his eyes. Let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who were in the king's provinces. Now, if you remember anything of a Persian politics, is that once the king signs something in declaration, he can't go back and unsign it. He can't reverse it. We can also see this in Daniel, when the king signed something but inadvertently didn't know that it put Daniel in the lion's den. He told Daniel, I can't reverse this. So what happened the next day, early in the morning, the king came to see if Daniel was still alive and if his God had saved him from the lions, and so it did. But we can see the politics of the Persian Empire is that the king, once he signs something in commandment, he can't go back and undo it. Also, this is the second time which she has come into the king's palace unannounced, and the king has also put out his golden scepter towards her to save her life. So, not only did she save the Jews from distinction, she also knows how to work her husband. So, it's to verse 6. For how can I endure to see the evil that would come to my people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my relatives? I want you to notice that she's not talking good about the Jews. She's not saying the Jews are very good people and they don't deserve this. No, she's talking about how it's her people and she doesn't want to see them destroyed, which is a huge deal back then, because we can see that they kept the lines, the heritages. You're the son of so and so. You're the son of so and so. So your heritage meant all the world to you. Verse 7, Then King Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, See, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and have hanged him on the gallows. Remember, hanging was different because it wasn't hanging like we see it as far as a noose. It was impaled. They would impale you on a spike. So he's hanging. Haman is hanging on a spike in Mordecai's front yard. Because he has laid his hands on the Jews, write also to the Jews as it pleases you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring for the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring may not be reversed by any man. What has been sealed by the king can't be reversed by any man, even the king himself. So he has written a decree that the Jews must be destroyed. What are they going to do? Okay, so he's given Esther and Haman authority to write commands. All the king has to do is sign it. So they can't take back what they did, but they can do something else if they think hard. So verse 9, then the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day of the month, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews and to the local governors, and the governors and princes of the provinces, which are from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to every province according to its writing, to every people in their language, and to the Jews and their writing and their language. This king was probably the head in all the earth at the time. He ruled so many provinces. You could see different languages. I mean, he was head honcho. Verse 10, he wrote in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's ring and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses that were bred from swift steeds. In those letters, the king granted the Jews who were in every city to gather themselves together and to defend their city, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and provinces that would assault them, their little ones and women, and to plunder their possessions. So Haman got the king to sign something very evil. It just shows to see that maybe they had this law in effect that once the king signs something, it can't be undone. So the king has to spend a lot of time thinking about it before he signs it. Maybe that's why it was in effect that way, because the king just couldn't do whatever he wanted. Verse 12, on the day of all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is in the month Adar, a copy of the letter that the decree should be given out in every province was published to all the peoples, that the Jews should be ready for that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So, what was their plan? Their plan was, we can't stop what has already been signed. What we can do is we can arm the Jews to fight back. Verse 14, so the couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on the king's commandment. The decree was given out in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai went out to the princes of the king in royal clothing of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and was glad. The Jews had light, gladness, joy, and honor in every province and every city, whether the king's commandment and his decree came. The Jews had gladness, joy, a feast, and a holiday. Many from among the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews had fallen on them. God is in their midst. They're winning every battle. But here's the crux. They could choose to fight, or they could choose not to do anything. Their deliverance was based on them. And that is how your soul works. That's why Esther is in the book. You have to fight. You can't just sit back and let Jesus just die for you for nothing. You have to work at this. Obviously, it's by grace. You also have to fight your flesh. Chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, which is in the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the month, when the king's commandment and his decree came near to be put in execution, on the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to conquer them. But it turned out that the opposite happened, that the Jews conquered those who hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in the cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who wanted to harm them. No one could withstand them, because the fear of them had fallen on all the people. All the princes of the provinces, the local government, the governors, and those who did the king's business helped the Jews, because of fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew greater and greater. The Jews struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and with slaughter and destruction. They did what they wanted to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They killed Perishadada, Delphin, Aspa, Poratha, Adala, Erathama, Parashana, and many others. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the Jews' enemy, but they didn't lay their hands on the plunder. They killed only the people that were after them. They did not go after their plunder. They did not want that. They just killed the people that were going to kill them. It was self-defense. Verse 11, on that day, the number of those who were slain in the citadel of Susa was brought before the king. The king said to Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Susa, including the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your further request? It shall be done. Then Esther said, if it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Susa to do tomorrow also according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Now remember, this is what Paul was supposed to do. King Saul was supposed to kill King Agag. He didn't do it. So who are the descendants of King Agag? Haman. The king commanded this to be done. A decree was given out in Susa, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. The Jews who were in Susa gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also in the month of Adar, and killed 300 men in Susa, but they didn't lay their hand on the plunder. They didn't want it. The other Jews who were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, defended their lives, had rest from their enemies, and killed 25,000 of those who hated them. But they didn't lay their hand on the plunder. This was done on the 14th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Susa assembled themselves together on the 13th and on the 14th day of the month, and on the 15th day of that month they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who live in unwalled towns make the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, a holiday, and a day of sending presents of food to one another. Mordecai wrote all these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to rejoin them that they should keep the 14th and 15th day of the month Adar yearly, as the days in which the Jews had rest from their enemies, and the month which they turned to them from sorrow to gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, which they should make them days of feasting and gladness, and of sending presents of food to one another and gifts to the needy. The Jews accepted the custom that had begun as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and cast pur, that is the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when this became known to the king, he commanded by letters that this wicked plan, which he had planned against the Jews, should return on its own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, from the word pure. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and that which had come to them, the Jews established and imprisoned on themselves and their descendants and all those who joined themselves to them, so that it should not fail, that they should keep these 2 days according to that which is written, and according to its appointed time every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept thoroughly every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail among the Jews, nor in the memory of perish from their offspring. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote in all authority to confirm the second letter of Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their appointed times, as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had declared, and as they imposed upon themselves and their descendants in the matter of their fasting and their mourning. The commandment of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. King Ahasuerus laid a tribute on the land on the islands of the sea. Aren't all his acts of his power and of his might in the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. For Mordecai the Jew was next to King Ahasuerus and great among the Jews, and accepted by the multitude of his brothers, seeking the good of his people and seeking peace to all his descendants. And that is the end of the book of Esther. Such an incredible book. Does not mention God anywhere in the book. And yet, Esther was pivotal into saving her people, the Jews. All these other people, they would worship other gods made by their own hand. Let's go on to some Proverbs, and then we'll be done. Proverbs 21. through 24. Whoever guards his mouth and his tongue keeps his soul from troubles. Very much true. The proud and arrogant man, scoffer, is his name. He works in the arrogance of pride. Pride is what made Lucifer fall. He thought he could be exactly like God. He could make his throne in the heavens and take over. May we squash that in ourselves. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the reading of your word, that we may know what happened to the Jews. And we know it's not pretty. We know that you don't want to take life, but you promised the Jews that you would be with them. You give everybody a chance, and you love everyone, but people make their own choices. May you be with us today, and we choose to be with you. Please talk to us today and be with us. In your name I pray. Amen. Thank you for joining me, and I'll be with you tomorrow. I'll see you later. Bye.